Move on to our next speakers. I'd like to introduce Dr. Malcolm Skingle from GlaxoSmithKline, who's going to give us a perspective about driving science through collaboration.
So good morning, everyone. My name's Malcolm Skingle. I'm Director of Academic Liaison at GlaxoSmithKline. And I'm going to spend around about the next 15 minutes running through my role, what I do for a living. And I'm going to leave 5 minutes at the end for some questions. And if we have a lot of questions and we don't get through them all, then I'm happy to answer them via email. So a bit about me first. I trained as a neuroscientist. So I was a neuroscientist for 20 years, working on diseases of the brain, before getting a role in business development about 25 years ago now. And I was acquiring technologies on behalf of GSK scientists, and then that broadened a little bit, such that I was setting up collaborations with universities around the world. And that's a role that I've done, like I say, for a quarter of a century. In the early days, it was just me and half a secretary. But as this function has grown, my team's grown. I've now got a team of 10, 5 people in Stevenage, where I work, and then 5 people in Philadelphia. And we broker around about 600 agreements a year, just to give some idea of the scale of the activity. So I work at the interface between scientists and science funders and those who set policy on science funding. So this is a slide of some of the organisations I work with. I sit on BBSRC Council, I sit on Ref Main Panel A, I sit on various NC3R committees, I chair the ABPI Strategic Leadership Group on Academic Collaborations, Education and Skills. I also chair the Science Industry Partnership, which drives the apprenticeship agenda in science companies in England. And I sit on many advisory boards, so many university ad boards, but also I sit on Diamond Synchrotron board, because we use the synchrotron, and the National Physical Laboratory. And I do this not because I particularly like committee meetings. I do this in order to access science and funding that helps underpin my company's internal research efforts. So a bit about my company. GSK is comprised of 3 major businesses: pharmaceuticals, where I work, and here we focus on science related to the immune system, human genetics, and some advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've got the vaccines business, obviously topical at the moment. We've got large manufacturing sites in Belgium, Italy, and the United States. And consumer healthcare. Some people don't know that, but we're the world's largest consumer healthcare company, following our joint venture with Pfizer. And in 2022, we are going to be splitting into 2 strong businesses. So consumer healthcare will separate off with in the JV with Pfizer, and GSK Pharma and vaccines will bond tighter together. We've got about 100,000 employees, just a little under, spread across 95 countries. But our main research sites are Stevenage, where I'm located in the UK, and Philadelphia in the US. And then we've got smaller research sites in Belgium, Italy, Spain, Japan, and Shanghai in China. And we've got about 12,000 of that 99,000 workforce who work in R&D. And the point I want to make here is that every single one of those research teams will collaborate with at least one or more university. So this slide has a very bold statement. GSK has more academic collaborations than any other UK headquartered company. It is a bold statement, but I believe it to be true, and that's kind of substantiated by the various surveys that have gone over the years. So we've got more than 120 major active alliance partnerships across the world, with most of these being in the US and Europe. Increasingly, we've got more academic collaborations in South America and Africa and the Far East, in part because new markets are opening up, and also the science bases are getting stronger in those regions. Now, there's a myth that industry do not publish their data and their scientific findings, but actually data doesn't actually go with that point. So this slide that I'm showing here is a map which is generated from the SciVal database, and it's generated a heat map of our collaborating institutions over a 5-year period. And there are more than 2,000 institutions where we co-authored 4,744 co-authored publications over that time period. And the orange spots you can see, which are hovering over Boston there are four spots there. They're the big institutions where we've got lots of collaboration, we're doing lots of publication. And then under the blue dot, which is the UK, we've actually got 6 in the UK, because the UK is a particularly fruitful place for us to do our collaborations. Now, sometimes we link our research and data from biotech or other science-driven companies with our academic collaborators. So we will actually act as a hub for various bits of science. So, for example, we do a lot in functional genomics in order to validate drug targets. And we've got a major alliance, in fact, with equity in 23andMe over in California. And we use their anonymized genetic database to identify patterns that cause disease. And we can then share some of this knowledge with some of our collaborators. So, for example, we can use gene editing to test a hypothesis relating to the effect of a gene in being causal in certain disease states. And our largest collaboration ongoing at the moment, we've got a $60 million 5-year collaboration with the Laboratory of Genomic Research at Berkeley, which we set up in 2019 with a lady called Jennifer Doudna. Well, Jennifer Doudna last year, along with Emmanuelle Charpentier, actually got the Nobel Prize for her work on CRISPR-Cas9 molecular scissors for gene editing. And like I say, we haven't got many of those collaborations of that scale, but just to give you some idea of how important it is to us, there are 24 academics and 14 full-time staff who are working on that. So why do we collaborate? Why do we put so much time and effort into academic collaborations? Well, we do it. My job's really about harnessing other sources of science and funding. And that's what I do on behalf of GSK. So we do it to de-risk our programs. So it shares the risks and the rewards. It allows us to access knowledge and laterally thinking academic thought. It allows us to build global links, particularly in developing markets. And of course, when we're after new skills, it allows us to recruit and think longer term. The most important thing is about delivering impact to our programs. And this is something that the UK government has been pushing for quite a while now. So through the REF impact case studies and also pathways to impact with the research councils. And on this slide, it demonstrates how GSK have been excellent collaborators over many years. And we were cited in the Dowling Review, which was an analysis of the top companies cited in the REF impact case studies. And the point I want to make here is a few points actually, but 15 out of the top 40 companies were pharma companies. And that doesn't surprise me, because if you have a look at the Office of National Statistics, 1/5 of the total R&D spend in the UK is in pharma, which is almost the same as automotive and aerospace combined. And GSK were top of that list, and we were cited in 152 impact case studies, which was 40 more than the next company, which was Rolls-Royce with 112, then it was Pfizer, then AZ. And the sharp iron amongst you, if you have a look at the arrow on the left-hand side of this graph, you'll see that they actually concertinaed from 50 to 150, otherwise it made us look far, far larger, and it dwarfed the others. The purple dots on this slide are the number of universities that name at least one collaborative project with the company, and both GSK and AZ had samples cited from 30 universities. And just to put this into context, from a BT perspective, BT was cited in 25 case studies, and they came from 10 universities, and they're 22nd in this listing. So I obviously like these data because they paint us in a good light and show the level of impact and how much we engage with universities in the UK. So what does the industry want from universities? Well, we want access to industry-friendly, open, laterally thinking academics. We want access to know-how and potential recruits. Often we use our collaborations to get an awareness of developing technology. To address the big industry challenges, we need a critical mass of strategically thinking scientists. We certainly need a multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. There's no way we can just have single disciplines now for some of our big scientific challenges. And the thing that is a challenge often in the academic base is effective project management. Sometimes that's the one ingredient that is actually missing. So industry criteria for selection of collaborative research projects, well, obviously strategic fit to GSK research. We're not a research council. It has to have value in our programs. The quality of science in the proposal is almost taken as a given. We only work with premier groups. Availability of facilities and resources. We don't refurbish laboratories for universities. We expect them to be well-founded. High likelihood of useful new information or technology arising for programs, and the timing with respect to deliverables. Sometimes I'll have our scientists who want to use a studentship to get an answer for something, and actually we need the answer in 6 months. You know you're not going to get it with a studentship. You're going to have to go in with a postdoc. And then importantly, does the academic see the value of the industrial input, or are they just take the money and run people? Points for academia to consider when choosing an industrial partner. Is the industrial scientist likely to make a significant intellectual contribution? Does the company have a good track record for collaboration with academia? I've just shown you that we have. Does the industrial scientist have access to knowledge or technology which may contribute to the proposed aims of the research? And often we'll have proprietary technology which will actually help with the publications. And is the industrial partner well placed to exploit IP arising from the collaboration effectively? Often we don't need to own IP, we just need freedom to operate. And then anybody wishing to engage a company should always review the scientific literature to see where we're publishing, have a look at the company website, catch the annual report, and that will always provide useful information. So what makes for a great strategic partnership? Well, obviously world-leading science, I said that's taken as a given. I think probably the most important thing relates to regular, honest communication about how things are going, where you appreciate each other's capabilities. There has to be trust. Effective Chinese walls must be in place. And most importantly, I think clear scientific program setting out the aims and objectives, which should be in the legal contract anyway. But if that changes, then you do an amendment to change that. And then publications. Just very quickly on publications, there are several performance indicators that you can use collectively to determine the quality of a company's science and how well they collaborate. So if you look at this slide here, for example, a third of GSK's publications are in the top 10% of the world's most cited publications, and 60% are co-authored with institutions in other countries, which just goes to show to talk about our global reach. When do partnerships go wrong? Well, usually when there's a breakdown in communication, sometimes when there's a personality clash because there's a battle of the egos, sometimes changes in personnel. It must be terrible for academics when they just get a program going and then a company will either change its strategy or its geography. We had an example of this over the course of a decade where we had neuroscience, which was in Harlow in Essex, and then we moved it to Shanghai, and then 5 years after that we moved it to Philadelphia in the US. These things do cause disruption. We do need to manage them. And then the other things would be, obviously, if there's misaligned expectations with respect to the timeliness of timelines of this research, and indeed if there's a lack of funding. So just in conclusion, I think pharma will increasingly share their technology and molecules with selected academic groups because it will drive our science forward. I think digital data analytics, we haven't focused on that, but I think digital data analytics will become increasingly important in all sectors, let alone pharma R&D. Skills development and talent anchor businesses in certain regions. We've got a very strong science base in the UK, which is why we've got so many of our global scientists here. And then to be successful in taking new medicines into the clinic, we need to dramatically increase our partner activity. Although we do a lot, you know, everybody's doing this now and we need to do even more. And I think I'll leave it there so that I've got time for some questions, and perhaps we'll open up the floor to questions now.
Great. Thank you very much, Malcolm. A fascinating area, and I've got the privilege of working with a number of pharmaceutical companies to try to understand this in a bit more detail. But a couple of questions I do have. The first one's skills. Are you seeing some kind of a skill shortage in terms of the right kinds of skills to be able to address some of these really big problems that not only pharma is facing, but industry as well? Can you hear me, Malcolm?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay. Did you hear the question?
Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay, Mike?
Yeah, I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, well, that's very strange. Yeah, so we know all the good groups in molecular biology and medicinal chemistry because we've been doing those things for years. But actually, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, full automation, and robotics, they're obviously newer for pharma. We actually established an artificial intelligence team in 2019, and that's grown quite rapidly. It'll be 100 team members by the end of this year, and that's based in San Francisco, London, Boston, Heidelberg, Philadelphia, and Tel Aviv. So it's quite broad ranging. My personal view is that if we don't address the skills issues around data analytics, because all sectors need them, I think there's going to be a dearth of those trained individuals. I think probably in 5-6 years' time, it'll be like public speaking and report writing. It's just one of those things that you'll need. You'll need digital data analytics, a bit of programming, if you're going to get a good job, because I think it goes across so many sectors.
Cool. And I guess I need to ask the big question about AI and ML, okay? And it's about the transparency of it. So increasingly companies are using it, BT's using it, big pharma's using it. But what happens when it goes wrong? Where's the transparency in AI in this environment to be able to uncover the actual issues with it when it doesn't quite work the way you want it to?
Well, I think that, certainly we've got experts on the IP side as well as on the technical side, because clearly we are going into new ground here, and particularly with the sorts of information that we'll be looking at, because obviously looking at anonymised, digitalised electronic health records, for example, you need to mine that data, but you can't then have that relayed back to an individual. So there are special ethical considerations and technical considerations that we have to consider there. But we're well placed here in the UK, I think, relative to some other parts of the world, because obviously we've got the NHS, we are digitising our healthcare records. And clearly, if you then combine those healthcare records on the phenotype with the genotype information, and obviously there's a lot of computation there in functional genomics, then obviously it will lead ultimately to better healthcare outcomes. And we're already seeing that. So we can actually break certain diseases down by the genotypic data that we have, and know that our treatments are going to be effective in those patients.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I guess one of the other big issues here is the whole collaboration piece. You're working with a lot of different companies, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different individuals. What's your single biggest challenge in that collaboration environment?
Well, there are obviously a few. We obviously do a lot of it because we know it adds a value. And often the academics we work with don't work with us because they think they're going to get some of the pharmaceutical company funding, although they do. They primarily do it to get access to our research and our intellect because it helps drive their science forward. I would say one of the major challenges at the moment is we are highly regulated as an industry. We have standard operating procedures, which isn't normally in the psyche of the academic. And I'm working with a group of academics actually to increase data integrity, because obviously if you read something in the literature, you want to be able to reproduce it. And that's sort of a well-trodden pathway in industry, but not always in some academic labs.
Okay, but what's the most positive aspect of the collaboration piece, though? So yeah, I mean, I can see where it might go wrong in some cases, but obviously there's an upside to it because you guys are really kind of doing it at an almost industrial scale.
Yeah, it is industrial scale. I mean, I've got a team of 10 people split across the US and UK, and all they do is put collaboration agreements in place. And that's because we see the value of it. I said in the talk, the number of scientists that we have, we've got some great scientists, world-leading scientists, but it's only a very small percentage of the total that we need to tap into. So we need to get to the laterally thinking academic. We need them to appreciate the science that we're bringing to the table, and most of them do. Once they've worked with us once, that's it. They're hooked. They always want to continue working with us because we actually help drive their science forward. And I really enjoy it when I go to a scientific project meeting and the quality of the science is taken as read, but sometimes you don't know who's the academic scientist and who's the industrial scientist. That's when you know things are working really well.
Okay. And what do you see as the next big breakthrough area in this whole collaboration area?
I think once we've really got our head around the artificial intelligence machine learning piece, I think it'll take it to another level. I mean, obviously it depends on things like where you're getting your data training sets for. I mean, we've got lots in our organisation and our industry. We have lots of very well curated data sets, and it's actually working out which data you can mash with what other data to create new knowledge. I think that would probably be one of the next challenges and significant moves forward.
Okay, and probably one final question. I know I'll work with some of our colleagues here at BT in the whole area of quantum computing. And I'm just seeing if you have a perspective on how something like quantum may be able to change this whole dynamic given its alleged computing power.
Yeah, well, quantum's just been out of our grasp for a few years now, I would suggest. But in fact, I actually sit on the National Physical Laboratory Scientific Advisory Board. And technologies like quantum, we would keep a watching brief on so that when we can hit the go button, we hit the go button. But clearly, it's going to revolutionise how we undertake our R&D within not only pharma, but within all sectors.
Okay, great. Malcolm, thank you very much. Once again, very insightful. As I said to the previous panel, I could continue this discussion for quite some time, actually, if we had the time, but I need to bring it to a close there. So, Dr. Malcolm Skingle from GlaxoSmithKline, thank you very much.